My brother erased my daughter from our family's history with a single perfectly crafted sentence, spoken from a polished stage under a 1,000-watt spotlight. He did it in a room filled with the city's elite, with cameras rolling and champagne flutes clinking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look at us. It was a clean, quiet assassination of my child's identity. In that moment, watching the light die in my daughter's eyes, I realized I had two choices. I could absorb the blow, shrink into the designer chair they'd assigned me, and teach my daughter that our worth was determined by the whims of powerful men. Or I could burn his carefully constructed legacy to the ground. I chose fire, and within 48 hours the foundation he had built his entire identity on would be nothing more than a hollow monument to his own arrogance. Let's back up, but not too far, just to the moment I was adjusting the strap on my daughter Maya's dress in the marble-floored lobby of the Atherton Museum of Modern Design. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, lilies, and a specific kind of simmering resentment that only family can generate. The event was the inaugural gala for the Ashton Legacy Grant, a philanthropic venture my brother, Leo, had created in our late father's name. On paper, it was a noble cause, a massive scholarship for underprivileged architectural students. In reality, it was a vanity project, a $2 million press release designed to cement the Ashton name, Leo's name, as a bastion of culture and power. "You look breathtaking, sweetie," I whispered to Maya, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. She did. At 16, she had all the grace I never possessed, a quiet confidence that hadn't yet been eroded by the world. She wore a deep emerald dress she'd picked out weeks ago, her eyes sparkling with a genuine excitement that made my heart ache. She was proud to be here, proud of her grandfather's legacy, proud of her family. She had no idea she was about to be publicly disowned. "Thanks, Mom. Do you think Uncle Leo will like the portfolio I brought?" she asked, clutching a slim leather-bound case. It contained her latest architectural sketches. She'd inherited our father's gift for design, his eye for line and form. She'd worked for weeks to perfect the drawings, hoping for a single word of encouragement from the man who now helmed our father's empire. "He'll love it," I lied. My stomach twisted into a familiar knot. Leo wouldn't even open it. To him, Maya was a footnote, a slight deviation in the otherwise perfect Ashton bloodline. She was the daughter of an artist, me, and a musician I'd loved fiercely, but never married. In Leo's world of prenups and Ivy League dynasties, that made Maya, and by extension me, a liability. My older sister Clara drifted over, her smile as tight as the pearls around her neck. "Chloe, you made it!" Her eyes darted nervously from me to Maya, then back again. Clara lived in a gilded cage, her life funded by Leo's goodwill and governed by his rules. "He's about to give the speech," she murmured, a warning disguised as a statement. "We're ready," I said, my voice betraying nothing. I led Maya to our assigned table, front and center. A strategic placement, I realized. Not an honor, but a necessity. We had to be seen. We were props in Leo's production. He needed the image of a complete, unified family, even if two of its members were considered defective. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Leo strode onto the stage, radiating the effortless confidence of a man who had never been told, No. He was handsome, charismatic, and utterly ruthless. He looked exactly like our father, but he had none of his soul. He began his speech, his voice smooth and resonant, speaking of our father's vision, of family values, of building a future. I watched Maya, who was leaning forward, her face illuminated by the stage lights, completely captivated. She looked like a girl watching a hero. The irony was a physical pain in my chest. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Clara. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I tried to talk to him. I didn't have to ask what she meant." I knew what was coming. The low-grade hum of dread I'd been living with for 20 years was about to crescendo into a full-blown siren. Leo was talking about the importance of lineage, of passing the torch. He smiled, a perfect predatory smile. "And the future of the Ashton legacy is in very good hands," he declared. "I'd like to introduce my incredible wife, Isabel, and the next generation who will carry our father's vision forward. My children, Thomas and Sophie." He gestured to his own table, where his wife and 2 perfectly coiffed children stood to polite, enthusiastic applause. And that was it. The speech continued. But for us, it was over. He had looked out over the front row, his eyes gliding past his niece, his sister's child, his father's first grandchild, as if she were a ghost. He didn't stumble. He didn't hesitate. It was a deliberate public erasure. I turned to Maya. The light was gone from her face. Her smile had frozen, and then collapsed. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, wide, with a dawning, gut-wrenching understanding. She didn't cry. She just deflated. It was as if someone had reached inside her and snuffed out a candle. She subtly slid her portfolio under her chair, out of sight. In that moment, something inside me didn't just snap. It vaporized. The part of me that had always made excuses, that had always smoothed things over, that had always accepted the scraps of affection Leo threw my way, turned to ash. I watched Leo wrap up his speech to a standing ovation. He was a king surveying his court, but his kingdom was built on a lie, and I was holding the match. The applause was still echoing when I stood up. The movement was sharp, decisive. It cut through the celebratory noise. A few heads turned. Clara was shaking her head frantically from across the room, her eyes pleading. I ignored her. "Maya," I said, my voice low but steady. "Pick up your portfolio. We're leaving." She looked at me, her eyes clouded with confusion and hurt. "Mom, what are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago," I replied. I walked, not toward the exit, but toward the stage. Each step was deliberate. The sea of tuxedos and silk gowns parted before me. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. I could feel Leo's gaze, hot with fury, as I ascended the small set of stairs to the stage. One of the event coordinators started to move toward me, but I gave him a look that stopped him in his tracks. There was a second microphone on a stand near the podium, left there for acknowledgments. I picked it up. The feedback squealed for a second, before the sound engineer adjusted it. The room fell into a dead, shocked silence. "A beautiful speech, Leo," I began, my voice amplified, calm, and dangerously clear. It carried to every corner of the marble hall. Truly inspiring. A masterclass in public relations. Leo's face was a mask of cold rage. He stood frozen a few feet away. "Chloe, get off the stage," he hissed, his voice a low growl that the microphone didn't catch. You spoke so eloquently about legacy, I continued, addressing the silent, gaping audience. About carrying on our father's vision. And you're right. He was a visionary. A brilliant, kind man who believed that family was everything. Which is why I find it so strange that you forgot someone. I turned and looked directly at my daughter, who was standing now, her portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. I beckoned for her to join me. Hesitantly, she walked toward the stage, her emerald dress a slash of color in the sea of black and white. She climbed the stairs and stood beside me, trembling but resolute. I put my arm around her. For those of you who don't know, I said, my voice ringing with newfound power, this is Maya, my daughter, your niece, Leo, your father's first grandchild. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. She is a gifted artist and a brilliant designer, just like the man we are supposedly honoring tonight. She is every bit a part of the Ashton legacy as anyone else in this room, and we will not be erased. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. I saw a journalist in the back scribbling furiously. Leo looked like he wanted to physically throttle me. His perfect evening, his perfect narrative, was cracking right down the middle. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice dripping with ice. We'll be leaving now. I placed the microphone back in its stand with a definitive click, took Maya's hand, and we walked off the stage. We didn't scurry. We didn't run. We walked, heads held high, right through the center of the stunned crowd, past the open mouths and the whispered condemnations, and out the grand entrance of the museum into the cool night air. The revolution had begun, and I knew exactly what my next move would be. This wasn't the first time Leo had tried to edit me out of the family portrait. It was just the most public. The cruelty had been a slow drip IV for most of my life, a constant, low-dose poison I had grown accustomed to. It started when we were kids. Leo was the heir, the golden boy, destined to take over our father's prestigious architectural firm. I was the artistic one, the dreamer, the one who painted on canvases instead of drafting blueprints for skyscrapers. Our father, a complex man named Richard Ashton, loved us both, but in different currencies. He loved Leo with investment and expectation. He loved me with quiet, almost secret, admiration. He was the one who bought me my first set of oil paints, who would sneak into my messy studio late at night to look at my work, a small proud smile on his face. You have the soul, Chloe, he'd tell me. Leo has the ambition. A family needs both. But publicly, ambition always won. Leo got the internships in London and Tokyo. I got a pat on the head and a warning from our mother to find a more stable hobby. The real schism began when I met Daniel, Maya's father. He was a jazz pianist, brilliant and passionate and completely unimpressed by my family's wealth. He saw me, not my last name. We lived in a small sun-drenched apartment above a bookstore, a world away from the cold, minimalist mansions of my childhood. We were happy. Leo saw him as a threat, a contamination. He called him the musician, with a sneer, as if the word itself were an insult. When I told my family I was pregnant with Maya, the reaction was chillingly pragmatic. "Is he going to marry you?" was the first thing my mother asked. "What are his financial prospects?" was Leo's. When I said marriage wasn't the priority, that our commitment was to each other and our child. They looked at me as if I'd announced I was joining a circus. From that moment on, Maya was branded. She was the inconvenient grandchild, the product of a union that didn't appear in the society pages. Daniel and I eventually drifted apart, our paths diverging as life often makes them do. The love was real, but the lifestyles were incompatible. We remained friends, co-parenting Maya with a respect and affection that my own family couldn't comprehend. But in Leo's narrative, I was now a single mother, a cliché he could use to further his agenda. He positioned himself as the stable, responsible scion of the Ashton family, while I was cast as the cautionary tale. After our father died, everything escalated. The will was a work of brutal precision. Leo inherited the firm, the family estate, the controlling shares, the entire empire. Clara and I received generous but finite trusts. And I received one other thing, something Leo had overlooked in his hunger for power. My father had left me his private studio. Not the building itself, but its contents. Decades of his life's work. Every private journal, every preliminary sketch, every failed design, every brilliant, unbuilt idea. His entire creative soul, bound in leather and locked in oak flat file drawers. At the time, I saw it as a sentimental gift, a father's last quiet acknowledgement of his daughter's spirit. I had no idea it would one day become a weapon. Leo used his inheritance to tighten his grip. He'd invite me to family events, but seat me at the kids' table. Metaphorically speaking. He'd send lavish gifts to Clara's children for their birthdays, and a polite, impersonal gift card to Maya. He was conditioning everyone, slowly and methodically, to see me and my daughter as lesser Ashtons. He controlled the family narrative, and he was writing us out of it, one passive-aggressive Christmas at a time. Clara, trapped by her financial dependence, became a silent accomplice. She'd send me apologetic texts after every slight, her guilt a constant, useless hum in the background of my life. "You know how he is," she'd write. "It's easier not to fight him." And for years, I believed her. I told myself it was easier. I swallowed the insults. I smiled through the snubs. I taught my daughter to be polite and grateful for the scraps of attention her uncle threw her way. I did it because I was afraid of the alternative. A total rupture. Complete exile. I thought preserving a broken, toxic version of family was better than having no family at all. I was wrong. Standing on that stage, with the weight of the microphone in my hand and the fire of defiance in my veins, I finally understood. You cannot be exiled from a place you were never truly welcome. You can only be set free. Walking out of that museum was like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. The cold night air was the first real breath I'd taken in years. Maya was silent beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly her knuckles were white. We didn't speak until we were in the back of a taxi, the glittering lights of the city blurring past the window. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. She shook her head, not in denial, but in disbelief. He just pretended I wasn't there. Her voice was small, fragile. In front of all those people. Why would he do that? "Because he's a small man, Maya," I said, my voice hardening. "And small men are terrified of people who have something they can't control. You have talent. You have heart. He has a checkbook and a legacy he didn't even build himself. He's a curator of our father's life, not the creator of his own." My phone began to buzz incessantly. A barrage of texts and missed calls. Leo, Clara, my mother. I ignored them all. When we got back to my apartment, a modest but comfortable space that Leo once called quaintly bohemian, I made Maya a cup of tea and sat with her on the couch. We didn't talk about the gala. We talked about her designs, about a new artist she admired, about anything other than the wound that was still fresh and bleeding. Around 1 a.m., my phone rang again. This time I answered. It was Clara. Her voice was a frantic whisper. "Chloe, what have you done? He's losing his mind. The donors are calling. The museum board is in an uproar. There's a reporter from the Chronicle who won't stop calling his publicist." "Good," I said calmly. "Good? Chloe, this isn't a game. You've embarrassed the entire family." "No, Clara," I corrected her. "Leo embarrassed the family. He humiliated a child, his own niece, to make a point. I just turned the lights on so everyone could see him do it." "He's going to cut you off," she warned, her voice trembling. "Completely. He's talking about dissolving your trust." "Let him," I said. The words felt liberating. "I don't want his money. It's not worth the price of admission." I could hear her start to cry, a sound of helpless frustration. "I have to go, Clara." I hung up before she could reply. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since my father was alive. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I made coffee, sat down at my desk, and looked at the number I had saved in my phone for years, under the name Contingency Plan. It was the direct line for Dr. Alistair Finch, the head archivist at the National Architectural Archives, the most prestigious institution of its kind in the country. He had been a close friend and colleague of my father's. I took a deep breath and made the call. "Alistair, it's Chloe Ashton," I said when he answered. "Chloe, what a wonderful surprise. I was so sorry to hear about Richard. The world is a dimmer place without him. I saw the press about Leo's new foundation. A fine gesture." "That's actually why I'm calling," I said, my heart pounding. "Leo's foundation has the money, but I have the legacy, the real one." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Go on," he said, his voice now sharp with academic curiosity. "Dad left me the entire contents of his private studio. All of it. The journals, the sketchbooks, the plans for the unbuilt projects, the conceptual drawings for the Met Wing. Everything. His entire creative process, from 1975 until the week he died." I could practically hear Alistair's jaw drop. "My God, Chloe, we thought all of that was lost or destroyed. Leo told the community it was all part of the corporate estate." "Leo lied," I said simply. "And I'm tired of letting him be the sole gatekeeper of our father's story. I want to donate it all. The entire collection. To the archives. Not to be locked away in a private vault, but to be digitized, cataloged, and made available to the public. For the students, the researchers, the people who truly loved his work. I want the Richard Ashton legacy to be a public gift, not a private brand." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Then Alistair cleared his throat. "Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "that would be the most significant architectural donation of the 21st century. It would change everything we know about your father's work." "I know," I said. "Let's draft the paperwork." After I hung up, I felt a lightness I hadn't known was possible. I had just taken my father's soul and given it to the world. And in doing so, I had just rendered Leo's $2 million gala utterly meaningless. The Ashton Legacy grant, without the primary source material of the Ashton Legacy itself, was now just a pile of money with a famous name attached. A hollow shell. Then, and only then, did I call my brother. He picked up on the first ring. "Have you lost your mind?" he screamed, dispensing with any pleasantries. "You are the laughingstock of the city. You and that daughter of yours. You are finished in this family. Do you hear me? Finished." I let him vent, listening to the predictable torrent of rage and entitlement. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice devoid of any emotion. "The National Architectural Archives will be sending a team to my apartment on Friday to begin packing up Dad's studio," I said. He was confused. "What are you talking about?" "I've just donated the entire collection. Every last sketch, every journal. It's all going to be public domain now, Leo. For everyone, the real legacy. Real." He was silent. I could picture his face, the blood draining from it, the dawning horror in his eyes. You what?" he stammered. "You wanted to be the gatekeeper of the Ashton Legacy, brother," I said, the words falling like chips of ice. "The problem is you don't actually own it. You just rented the name. I have the work. And now, so does the world. Your little foundation is now a footnote. Good luck explaining to your donors why the primary materials for the legacy they're funding are now housed with a public institution that you have no control over. Goodbye, Leo." I hung up the phone and blocked his number. I looked over at Maya, who had been listening from the doorway, her eyes wide. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face. It was the first time I'd seen her truly smile in 24 hours. It was the smile of a girl who had just watched her mother slay a dragon. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The National Architectural Archives, knowing a major PR coup when they saw one, issued a press release that very afternoon. It was picked up by every major news outlet and architectural journal in the world. "Chloe Ashton, daughter of visionary architect Richard Ashton, makes historic donation," the headlines blared. "The lost archives of a master designer to become public treasure." My name, the one Leo had tried so hard to diminish, was suddenly everywhere, inextricably linked with the preservation of our father's true genius. Leo's name was mentioned too, but not in the way he would have liked. The articles framed his Ashton Legacy grant as a well-intentioned but ultimately superficial gesture, now completely overshadowed by the monumental cultural gift from his sister. He was a footnote in the story of his own father's legacy. The narrative he had spent millions to control had been rewritten in a single day, and I was holding the pen. The calls started, but this time they were different. They weren't from my enraged family. They were from my father's old colleagues, from museum curators, from university professors, all calling to express their profound gratitude and admiration. They didn't see me as a troublemaker. They saw me as a hero of artistic preservation. They saw me as my father's daughter, in spirit and in deed. Clara called again. This time her voice wasn't frantic. It was awestruck. "I just saw the news," she whispered. "Chloe, you actually did it. You beat him." "There was no game to win, Clara," I told her, my voice gentle but firm. "I just chose to protect my daughter and honor our father. That's all." "He's a wreck," she continued, a note of grim satisfaction in her tone. "He's been in meetings with his lawyers all day. Apparently several of the grant's key donors are threatening to pull their funding. They feel misled. They gave money to support the Ashton Legacy, and now the actual legacy is somewhere else entirely." They're saying it's a breach of faith. I felt a sliver of something that might have been pity, but it vanished quickly. He had sown the wind, and now he was reaping the whirlwind. The best call, however, came a few days later. It was from Ben Carter, the Dean of the School of Architecture at the State University, a prestigious but chronically underfunded public institution that my father had always secretly championed. "Miss Ashton." "Chloe," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I'm not sure if you know, but your father anonymously funded a scholarship here for years. He believed in public education, in giving a chance to the kids who couldn't afford the Ivy League price tag." I didn't know. It was another secret he had kept, another piece of his soul that Leo had never bothered to discover. "The reason I'm calling," Dean Carter went on, "is about your daughter. I saw her work, the portfolio she brought to the gala. Your sister Clara sent me a photo of it. The girl has a gift, Chloe. It's raw, but it's there. It's your father's eye. No question." He paused. "We'd like to offer Maya the inaugural Richard Ashton Memorial Scholarship at our university. A full ride. We want his legacy to start here, with his own granddaughter." Tears streamed down my face. Hot, cleansing tears of joy and vindication. I looked over at Maya, who was sketching at the kitchen table, lost in her own world of line and shadow. She had been cast out of a false legacy, only to be welcomed as the cornerstone of the real one. "We accept," I choked out. "Dean, we gratefully accept." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Archivists in white gloves carefully packed up my father's life's work, treating each sketch and journal with the reverence of a holy relic. Maya and I visited the university, where she was greeted not as an inconvenient footnote, but as a celebrated talent. She walked the campus with a newfound confidence, her shoulders back, her head held high. She was no longer defined by who had excluded her. She was defined by who had welcomed her. I never heard from Leo. Directly again. Clara told me he had become a recluse. His grand philanthropic project in ruins. His reputation in the architectural world tarnished. He had tried to build a monument to himself, using our father's name. And in the end, all he had was an empty pedestal. He had the money, the houses, the corporate shell of our father's firm. But I had the soul, and I had given it away. The lesson, I realized, wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. For years, I had allowed my brother to define my family story, to define my worth, and to define my daughter's place in the world. I had fought for a seat at a table where the food was poisoned. The moment I stopped fighting to get in and simply chose to build my own house was the moment I became free. Legacy isn't something you inherit in a will or slap a name on at a gala. It's not about power or money or control. A true legacy is the love you cultivate, the integrity you uphold, and the art you put into the world. It's the quiet, unseen acts of kindness, like a scholarship for a state school, or a secret admiration for a daughter's paintings. My father's real legacy wasn't in the skyscrapers Leo managed. It was in the sketchbooks I had saved. It was in Maya's talent. And it was in my decision to finally choose my own family, on my own terms. We don't talk about Leo anymore. His name is like a foreign word from a language we no longer speak. A few months ago, Clara left her husband and her gilded cage. She moved into a small apartment downtown and enrolled in a landscape design course. She and I have coffee every Tuesday. We're learning to be sisters again, without the looming shadow of our brother's approval. Maya is thriving at university. She's the star of her program, and her professors say she has the potential to be one of the great ones. She's building her own future, not with the weight of a dynastic name on her shoulders, but with the freedom of her own talent in her hands. Sometimes, I watch her work, her brow furrowed in concentration, and I see my father. I see his passion, his vision, his soul, and I know with every fiber of my being that he would be so proud. As for me, I'm painting again. My studio is filled with light and color, and the kind of peace that only comes from knowing you did the right thing. I didn't burn down my family's legacy. I liberated it. I took it back from the man who tried to hoard it and gave it to the world, where it belonged along. So I ask you, when faced with an injustice that is woven into the very fabric of your family, do you keep pulling at the thread, hoping it won't all unravel? Or do you take the scissors and cut yourself free? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more tales of finding your own power. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. You never know when you'll need a reminder to build your own house.